Hello and welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network, where we reflect on Wildbow's most wordy work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse, and that's Elliot Diebold. Is it? Is that Elliot Diebold? Oh, here
I'm
he
still,
is.
yeah, I am Elliot Diebold.
Woo woo! Congratulations!
Sorry,
Now,
we've been having some technical problems to do with the fact that I'm, in the middle of my parents' house.
I thought for
Yeah.
a second that this was just a me episode, and that you were gone. But no, Elliot's back. What a twist. Yeah, we're coming to you live in the Discord. This is our last two-person recording of the of the year. Elliot, you're going to be taking the reins for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. So unfortunately, you're going to be stuck with me for the rest of the year, everyone.
Tragic. But anywho, actually no, before we start, I want to just plug one thing, which is the Power Reflections Twitter. Because genuinely, I'm very happy with what we've been doing, Elliot. Do you want to tell everyone what we've been doing with it?
I mean, nothing too grand. We put memes on there. It's not.
Yes.
It's not groundbreaking.
But I think, to be honest, a high number of pretty quality level Power memes. So if you want to go and check that out, they're pretty fun. I really have fun coming up with some of them, or reading the ones that Elliot comes up with. If anyone has any fun Pale memes, send them to us and we'll pop them on the Twitter and we'll credit you and everything.
Yeah,
that just sounds fun.
Or post them on your own Twitter and add us.
Yeah, defo. Anywho, let's get back into the story, shall we?
Let's do it.
We're kicking off Left in the Dust this week with 16.1 and 16.2. We're with Verona and Avery, but first up, 16.1 with Verona. And we go back in time a bit to the council meeting where they were talking about taking down the Fan Bam man. And yeah, it's interesting. So the Kennet Council, we'll get to the bit where they talk to the foreman in a bit, which is something that I was really excited to see. But before then, the council is just kind of talking about how Kennet's going, and Verona and the Kennetiers bring up a little bit of a prod for the council, I suppose.
Yeah, there's also some brief talk of how they should use the battery that Verona stole from Thea. And like a part of that is they're kind of talking what should the third pillar be. So they're talking about setting up spirit shrines in the Undercity as well. And they're trying to figure out the third one. Like I remember Avery pitched the spirit world, but Miss and some of the others sort of fight against the idea of that one because they're not particularly tied into the spirits right now. I mean, the closest thing we've got to a big spirit this city is Liz. The Warrens also gets talked about, but obviously shot down because it's a stupid idea. But I'm curious, between you, Ruben, and the chat, what do you reckon a third realm? What do you reckon the answer is? If they need to pick a third level of existence to pin Kennet to, what should it be?
Well, it was interesting. The way you asked this question made me think, we've been very explicitly talking about Lucy taking care of Kennet and Verona taking care of the Undercity, which means that the third realm should be one that Avery is connected to, which obviously implies the paths, right? Especially because she's far away, and that would be not only something that she could handle, but a way that she could, come back pretty easily, theoretically, back and forth, I suppose. So I do like that. I wonder if that requires, a specific Kennet path.
Yeah.
And what that would mean, or whether they adopt something like, not the FRT, but, something like it, or the Promenade maybe is better.
The Promenade was my guess, but you're right. I think the problem is most of the other realms that are talked about tend to map one-to-one with the quote-unquote real world, whereas the paths don't.
Yeah, but the Promenade is an interesting one as a kind of hub. It obviously would serve quite a strong purpose if it was tethered to Kennet.
They should ask first, right? A bunch of people live there.
Well, yes, of course. Don't just do it, especially because we've obviously seen the trouble that they have with incorporating the Undercity into the council and stuff, and presumably we would want to do something similar with the denizens of whatever path we choose. which is why it should be the FRT, and then you get the wolf on the council. No, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the other thing that I was thinking of that Vice Versailles who kind of points out is like a Soot Sleeves Kingdom esque kind of locational thing. I don't know. Yeah, I think Soot Sleeves' path is maybe
Something
a good
like that,
example
but
of what it could be. Yeah.
yeah, something like that, but not that one because her kingdom sounds like it sucked ass.
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah. But Soot Sleeves is already, kind of on Team Avery, so
Mm.
I don't know.
Well, she probably has
Um,
interesting like perspectives on this stuff because she's gone through that process of having her kingdom anchored to
yes,
Earth.
yes,
I don't wait. That feels like it maybe would be relevant. Might
yeah,
not be. I
definitely,
don't know.
yeah,
Um,
um, yeah,
but yeah, sorry. So yeah, the real like meat and potatoes of this conversation is basically the Kenneteers kind of reality check all of the Kennet others
yes,
about their priorities. And there's this great quote from Lucy where she says, "We might have to let go of individual plans and ideas, stuff that we
mm,
might not be able to salvage." And she's very specifically talking to Miss and Toadswallow
mm-hmm.
there. And it's so cool watching the Kenneteers kind of step up. Like this is them really turning into the leadership of the town.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point for them to bring up, right? Because it's really true that despite the fact that Miss kind of already acknowledges that she's letting go of what Ken originally was. Like it's a slow process. At Toadie's Market, he's been, he's been waiting for a long time. Waiting, he's just agreed to kind of set it back for 2 years until Snowdrop comes back into town or whatever, right? Like
Yeah.
it's very idealistic, and I think it's a good representation of the fact that the Kenneteers, I think, used to be quite idealistic about trying to find the perfect solution to problems. And we have talked about the fact that they live in the real world. They need to make more compromised decisions. And this is them kind of imparting that lesson onto the Kennet others, I suppose.
Yeah, because one of the things like Miss is saying is she sort of like, oh, the barrier's down, but it'll grow back and we can sort of recreate this sanctuary. And Lucy's like, yeah, but it's going to take like what hundreds of years for that
Yeah.
to sort of grow back, and
Yeah.
you're gonna get blown up in the meantime. And like she says, and Miss is sort of like, shit, like good point. And it's very like this is the same mistake Miss made. Like, do you remember like way back in Arc One, it was sort of a bit of a thing because the Kennet others waited like 2 or 3 months before awakening the Kenneteers,
Yes. Yeah.
and it was one of those, oh, others just sometimes forget about deadlines or timelines. And it
Yeah.
just felt like Miss was falling into that same trap. And like this is what this is the Kenneteers not just fulfilling a kind of gap in the Kennet other makeup, but just really stepping into this sort of leadership role, which is it's just so funny because the whole point of like they are woke practitioners in this town that was sort of trying to be away from the seal with the idea that the practitioners would help keep the rest of the seal at bay. And now the practitioners have kind of leapt up and they're like, oh, we are taking control of like what the others are trying to do, and they're not doing
Mm,
it in a tyranty way. They're like they're very much doing it for the others. It's just
mm.
there's something really powerful about the idea that these Kenneteers who are kind of awoken in a place that wanted to avoid the seal have had to kind of step into that role anyway. Like you can see these parts of the seal that really made sense back in the day here.
Yeah, definitely. God, I'm just thinking, can you imagine how nice it would be if the Kenneteers had a few extra months at the start of the year before things went hectic? Oh, that would have been nice. Oh well. But yeah, you're right. Like the Kennet others need this. They need this prompt. So, they've picked some good Kenneteers, that's for sure.
Yeah, I like ironically Miss is falling a bit of a victim to her own success in that she picked the Kenneteers
Yes.
to surprise everyone with how competent they are, and now they're having to reality check her as well a bit. And it seems like it's for the best. It's just it feels so good. Like this, we'll talk about it towards the end of the chapter, but this arc is really sort of establishing that we're entering like kind of a next phase in the journey for everyone, and you just really feel that as the Kenneteers step up here.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Also, a little detail I just wanted to call out before we move away from this conversation is it's been mentioned in the past that Rook kind of hangs masks around her balcony, and like Miss can use those to kind of, you know, hide her face. And it's just a bit easier for her. But there's like a really cool extension of that in this scene where there's like three different masks, and as Miss shifts position based on like her mood, her head moves behind like a different mask, and so the masks almost act like kind of facial expressions, but they're very like interpretive ones because it's like a half built thing of bricks as one mask and like just a chain with pearl white eyes. But it's like it's used as a way for her to convey emotions. It's really cool.
Mm. Yeah, it is cool. It's a real, like, each time she shifts, we get a descriptor of the new mask on, the mask that is now covering her
Yeah.
face. And it's a really cool marker of her mental or emotional state, or, the decisions that she's making in her head being adjusted over time in a way that, obviously we would normally read that from facial expressions or body language, which obviously we kind of can't do with Miss. And I think this is just a wonderful way to get around that, while also showing how cognizant of and like compassionate to others Rook is,
Hmm.
lowercase o others, I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. Rook continues to, like, I love every time we're having meetings at Rook's place and she has this fucking old school tea party vibe. Like, she serves everyone drinks. I mean, I know I'm jumping ahead, but as the Undercity people arrives, she has like tailored drinks for each member. Like, she's so. I love how Rook's subversive nature has kind of almost circled right back around to like enforcing all of these very formal traditions. Like, it just wouldn't have been my guess for what an Oni would have been, and I love it.
Mm. Yeah. The the amount of like care and respect that Rook has is very different to what I would have thought an Oni would be like, but she's just so kind in
Yeah.
wonderful ways.
Well, and to me, like specifically, a lot of the stuff like people in chat are mentioning, like how she puts a coaster under the battery when Verona puts it on the table and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Like, some of it really speaks to like that thing we've been talking about since the Oni were first introduced, where when you've kind of defined yourself by opposing the system, you tend to end up looking a bit like it anyway.
Mm,
So all of this like really strict stuff, like serving people drinks and stuff, like it's her kind of falling back into the system a little bit.
mm. Yeah, interesting. Um, so yeah, the three leaders of the Undercity arrive, and the Kennetiers begin negotiations for their new council members. And yeah, goes interestingly.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously like a bunch of great like character moments as we see
Mm,
these two groups interact for the first time. But I almost want to specifically call out a moment that doesn't have anything to do with that, which is where Lucy calls grandfather the leader of like the Dogs of War, and he
mm.
argues against her, and it's just like, oh, Lucy, you've got a long fucking way to go if you want this guy to be your Carmine candidate, and he won't even accept the responsibility of the people he's essentially in charge of.
Yeah, which I find very interesting because the one that he keeps calling the leader, I've forgotten what his name is, but we haven't Horseman. That's it. We
Yeah.
haven't seen him around, right? Like
Horseman was
he's
one of the
off.
first to piss off, yeah.
Exactly, he's off doing his other stuff. Uh, it's kind of like it's this really weird dynamic where we, as the audience, are definitely in Lucy's head around Grandfather being the leader here because Grandfather has taken the lead while Horseman has been away. Like it feels very. I don't really know what to take from it. I don't know the fact that Grandfather keeps insisting the Horseman is in charge, but he is somebody who we have literally never seen. It's like it's very strange, and I wonder what it's. I feel like Wabo is doing something, and I don't know what it is, but he's up to something.
I think it's just kind of reinforcing this idea, like grandfather is someone who doesn't want command, and I mean, we've talked about this a bunch in the context of this story. I mean, in my mind, that makes him a better choice for leader,
Yeah.
because he's not seeking it, and like, I think the thing that's kind of defined grandfather so far is he does seem to be aware of other people and how they operate. Like his
Well, that
specialty
yeah.
has been people, as far as I can tell. So I really like him as a candidate. It's just like it's clearly not something he's seeking out, which is good, but also means Lucy's got to work cut out for her if she's going to try and shape him into what she needs.
Well, yeah, I mean, it means he would be a great leader, but he doesn't want to be one, right? Like the same with his care about people. He clearly that's what we want, right? Like
Yeah,
I kind of get the vibe that grandfather sees Horseman as like he's the primo fighter, he's the best battle leader, but that's not necessarily what we want, right? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see when Horseman comes back, how that
uh, yeah.
shifts.
I mean, I think like grandfather might also be thinking too much from a like military combat perspective. Like horseman
Yes,
might be the
exactly.
better like tactician, like on the ground fighter. Whereas like for the Carmine, what we really want is well, we want a judge. We don't want a general or a corporal.
Yeah, exactly right. We want somebody that we can trust to make good decisions out that aren't battle focused.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I guess you want
exactly.
both, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have something to do with violence, otherwise he won't last long as Carmine. I mean, what's
Mm.
interesting is like Lucy's still talking about like shaping him into being the Carmine candidate she needs. Doesn't that take the form of getting him to kill specific people to get the skills that she wants him to have? Like
Well,
eh,
that's the direct way to shape a dog. There's maybe a less direct way of just being, the old-fashioned way of shaping somebody, which is
what tutoring?
time, time and training. Yeah, but no, yeah. I mean, it's not just shooting the people that she wants him to learn from, but that's explicitly shooting good leaders, caring people. Like it's murdering good people, which is rough.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, what
yeah.
the thing we did learn from John's interlude was that the way he killed people affected what he got from them. So, like
Mm,
shooting Alexander in the head, he got a bit more of Alexander's smarts. He got his heart from shooting that other guy in the heart. So,
mm.
like, what you got to do is find shit people who have like one or two of the good qualities you need and just kill them the right way.
You know what it is? I wonder if you don't have to kill the people, but just sign up grandfather to receive, donated organs, specific organs that you're looking for, or steal kind of organ donations. Grandfather just goes, opens up a cold box with a heart of a good person in it, fucking shoots that. Not killing the person. Or, I mean, if it's heart donation, probably they're already dead, to be honest. But I wonder if that would work. If you just shoot an organ, would you get would you get the would you get the qualities there?
So you just
Like
like steal people's livers and shoot the livers.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
Well,
that's better than
yeah.
killing them.
Well, yeah, I guess organ donations would be probably from people who are always often dead, but maybe it'd be worthwhile. I guess if they're gonna just find organ donors who are about to die, maybe that's the
Yeah.
most ethical way to do it. and,
I think
and
this came up when we first started. I think we had a discussion question maybe on like how you could ethically like
mm,
raise a dog up, and I
yeah,
feel like the answer some people came at us with was like for euthanasia,
hmm
uh, like if somebody's about to die anyway. Which I feel like in this world when they're in the service of war and stuff, if it's not actually like proper combat or like an assassination or something, it won't count.
yeah. Not to mention, if you can find people who are about to die, you can probably save them. So I don't
Nah,
know.
nah.
Yeah. Um,
But yeah, sorry, I guess going back to the topic of like the undercity denizens who just showed up because that was what we were meant to be talking about. It it's just really cool, and I think we have mentioned this that the Kennetiers are working to foster peace in the undercity like this. Just because the undercity has so been shaped and defined in many ways by Charles and the Carmine influence of like the bloodiness, and it's such a violent place, and it just feels like the first big moral victory the Kennetiers would have over like Charles and Liz if they form a stable political environment in the Undercity. Like there'll still be violence within the groups and everything, but
mm,
like they're taking the war out,
yeah.
which is it feels like a big deal when it's such a Charlesy place.
Yeah, I really like that point. Like, the more peaceful they can make the Undercity, it feels like it's like what a slight against Charles if you're a Carmine and your domain doesn't have any strife in it. You know what I mean? Like no violence. Like fuck. Can they just use that to forswear Charles immediately? I don't know.
No, it's one of those things where it'll give them an edge at some
Yeah,
point. Like it's one domino knockdown kind of deal.
yeah, yeah. Um, I I guess we'll talk about the foreman strategy in a bit, but I just really love the way that it's set up. That there's a bit where as the new councillors, the undercity councillors are coming up, Verona's like giving a bit of commands and says to Matthew, "Don't hide that you're injured," and that's just such a weird. And then she says because of strategy, and then they're already here, so she can't elaborate. And it's just so juicy, and it's like it reveals itself perfectly, and it all makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. It's just it's a wonderful little twist on the, because I was asking the question of like,
Why is
what,
he here?
yeah, or when I saw the foreman had been recruited to bring down the family
Yeah.
man, the obvious question is like, oh no, does that mean they're making deals with the foreman, and which is obviously something that they didn't want to do. But no, like they've handled it perfectly, and it's just so nice to see. It's just lovely.
Yeah, you're right. This sort of reveal here where, because they deal with the Bitter Street Witch and then the vice principal, and the whole time I was just sitting there being like, yeah, but what fucking concessions are they going to have to make for the
Mm-hmm.
foreman?
Yeah,
And yeah, as that piece comes down, and you're right, on the second read, all these bits of setup, I was just like, oh, this is, yeah, very clever.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, the negotiations start. First up is the BSW, who agrees pretty quickly um, to join the council once they bring up the Nicolette apprenticeship thing. But the BSW, the thing I love about the BSW is how much she bargains for
Mm,
each little piece of things that they can give her. She's just very
she's very
savvy.
canny.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because she very early establishes I don't even want territory, and then manages to be like, "Oh, I'll give you guys territory, and in exchange, I get all this extra stuff." And it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think even Verona calls out she didn't even want that. Like, you know, it's so. Just the more we see of the Bitter Street Witch, the more I enjoy her. She's so
Mm-hmm.
great.
Yeah. She is wonderful. I really love, like, because I think she's clearly like very invested in the success of Kennet, which is great. But she's still doing it, being a council member and getting selfish gains. Like she is bargaining
Yeah,
for every little scrap, and it's just it's such a different vibe. She like I don't think we've ever had anyone on the council who is so overtly bargaining for their own benefit, as opposed to like the good of Kennet as a whole. Maybe BSW will get there eventually, but I just do really like that she's selfish in that way. It just is a
but
fun
yeah,
vibe.
like openly and not unreasonably so, I think is the standard as well. Like it's not like a
Yeah.
fairy. She's more like Rook, where she's just like she's very upfront. This is what I want,
Yes.
and then just like stands her ground to get it. She's not playing people. She's not being sneaky. She's just
Yeah.
extremely upfront and direct and stubborn. It's great.
Yeah. 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 Definitely.
There's also one of the things that's brought up in the discussion of like ceding territory is this idea that one of the contested areas has been like the cinema and the arena, where whenever the vice principal takes them over, they've been like playing movies and they've set up like games houses and stuff. And
Mm.
basically, the concession is that she can have them and keep that up as long as the Street Witches people get to go to this like eternal shitty school fate.
Mm.
Um, I'm equal parts excited and terrified to see what this House of Horrors would look like.
I think it's delightful. Like it's a great example of like what the stable version of the Undercity looks like, is like
Yeah, yeah,
structured violence. I just think that's wonderful. Yeah.
yeah. That's a great point. Ah, sorry, I just had the thought. Bitter Street Witch for Carmine. That's my new tinfoil.
Hmm. Um.
She won't want it, but neither does
Yeah.
grandfather. So
Yeah. Again, not wanting it is maybe good. Being a street witch for Carmine, I feel like that would be bad, but I can't put my finger on why. So maybe that means it's good. Um, we didn't touch on the principal, the vice principal, but she is again just an absolute delight. I
Yeah.
do also love how the BSW is integral in helping to bring her on board. Yeah, she's just great.
Yeah, I love how she arrives in like a unicorn outfit or something, and I was just like, oh, I've forgotten how enjoyable the concept of the vice principal is. This bloodthirsty leader who's like a 7-year-old girl or something.
Mm.
It's just hilarious. And she like suggests to the foreman that she could probably take him in a fight, or maybe not him directly, but she's like, I can defend myself, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I mean, I really want to see that. I know that sounds terrible because I'm calling for somebody to attack this young girl, but also I just want to see it.
Yeah, what a fun fight that would be. And maybe we will get to see it knowing where the foreman is going. Like what does the vice principal's fighting look like? They feel very scrappy. Like
Yeah,
almost dog of war-esque in how difficult the vice principal's students would be to put down, I suppose.
yeah, I'm thinking very goblin-esque. Just like she just won't go down, and she just keeps stabbing
Mm,
with
yeah.
like a fucking fairy pixie wand or something. It's
Yeah.
got like a shank on the end.
um, so yeah. Anyway, then we get to the foreman who, they offer a genuine offer to, and he turns it down. But that's all the plan, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I love this politics. I guess we already talked about this. What's going to be really interesting with these games they've played with the foreman here is so Verona's very explicit in her head that they plan to make moves against him later. Like he's not long for this world if they have anything to say for it. And I think that that's really interesting because they've kind of invited all three of these guys here under this guise of like, oh, a united front against the family man, a position on the council. And so like backstabbing the foreman, like I could see that being a way to sow discontent with, you know, the vice principal and maybe the
Mm,
Bitter Street Witch
mm,
as just this way of like kind of going against the sentiment they expressed here in this meeting, which we know is like because we know they actually do want to work with those other two. It's very much just the
yes.
foreman. But I could see the vice principal not necessarily being able to trust them in that same way because she doesn't get to live in their heads every like week.
Well, I think that's why their plan is so strong, is because they made a genuine offer, right? And if the foreman had accepted it, I think they would have had to go with it.
Hmm. I
But
guess yeah. Well, it's just interesting because like so much of this meeting is really pitched as Kennet will come together and unite with the Undercity, and we're going to recognize you as equals.
mhm.
But really, Kennet is also very deliberately shaping the Undercity, and I don't disagree with Kennet. Just to be clear, like I think I absolutely agree with the Kenneteers on this one. But you can see how Undercity denizens might take issue with the fact that, like, really, at the end of the day, it kind of seems like only two of the original four powers are going to be members of this council. Like, Kennet is kind of bringing them in as equals, but on their terms.
But I don't think so, because the things that they did to get the foreman not to agree weren't making bad deals with the foreman. They were making themselves seem weaker because they knew that his problem would be uniting with them if he smelled weakness and stuff like that, right? Like he they completely, it wasn't about making a bad deal with him. It was having him reveal his own shittiness. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, no, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that at all. But I'm saying, like, from the perspective of, say, like some rando person in the Undercity, Kennet's coming at this from a place of saying, "Oh, we're bringing the Undercity in and making them equal," but also Kennet is very much defining, like, what the terms of the negotiations are and who kind of gets to be on that council through influences like this.
mm,
So it is like, if you are one of the foreman's workers, I mean, you probably hate the foreman because it sounds like most of them are slaves. But I don't know if you're like a lieutenant or something. Like you can see how this would seem unfair because, or not unfair, just deceitful because, yeah, Kennet isn't allowing the Undercity in; they're shaping the Undercity and then allowing the parts they like in. Which again, I
mm.
think is the right call for Kennet. I don't disagree with it, but it's something I could see parts of the Undercity taking issue with, and I can see from their perspective why that's a fair argument.
Mm, yeah, yeah. I suppose. I don't know. I I don't think it is a fair argument from their perspective because the opportunity was fully given. Like
Well,
anyway.
but I mean, it was like it wasn't. They specifically played him in a way that they knew he wouldn't take it. Like I'm just like
But no. But if that's the thing. Like that they didn't want him to take it, but that he could have, and that would have been a marker that he can be dealt with. I think who said it, was Zik. Zikri. Fuck, I remember I was pronouncing it
uh,
wrong.
Zekri, I'd say.
No, but fuck, I remember Zikri told me last week I was pronouncing it wrong, and I forget how it was meant to be pronounced. So pop that in chat again, Zikri. Zikri, that's it, Zikri. Zikri has put in chat, like, if the foreman had accepted it, it would have been a marker that, yes, he could have been somebody they would have worked with, because the things that they thought that would make him not accept it were the things that make him shitty, right? So if he had accepted it, it's a clear marker that actually they're very willing to work with him because there would
Yeah,
be an opportunity for him to overcome his shittiness. So it's not,
no,
while
because
they
they
didn't
didn't.
want him to take it, it's not, it
No, because
wasn't
that's
a
implying that they just like.
manipulation.
Yeah, no, that's implying that they just flat out gave the offer. They specifically manipulated who was talking to put him off.
Mm.
Like, again, I'm not disagreeing because the things they were taking advantage of was like his misogyny and like all this dumb shit that I like. This, as I said, I agree with Kennet, but like the point is they manipulated it so that he was a lot less likely to agree, and they're manipulating that shittiness. But again, that's like that's them deciding what parts of the Undercity are acceptable and get brought in, not accepting the Undercity.
Mm. Mm.
Like
I
it's just
suppose.
like again, I'm not against Kennet on this because I think all of the things they're drawing the line against are things that should have lines drawn against them. But like at the same time, Kennet is framing this as, oh, we're bringing you in and making you equals, and it's like they're doing that, but with like a series of conditions that kind of leave a lot of people out.
Mm. 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 Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. But anyway, it works really well. Thank you. It goes exactly to plan, so that's great. Um, so yeah, the negotiations are done. We jump forward, and now we're at the grand opening of Toad's Market. And God, this is so much fun.
Yeah.
We'll get to the items that are for sale in a moment, because they're fucking delightful. But the thing I really like about this is the marker of it starts with Toady chiding somebody for a goblin for not following the rules, and then having them be kind of punished to follow the rules better, which inherently kind of leads to goblins being slightly more willing to follow the rules. And I love this as like a demonstration that the market opening is a stabilizing force against the chaos of like goblins inherently, right? Like it's a great representation of how Kennet is going to change the way that the practitioner world works through these systems like Toad's Market, adding some more structure to the chaos of goblins to make them to sand off the rough edges a bit, I suppose. It's just such a
Yeah.
cool indication of like, Kenneth's changing the world. It has the possibility to change the world, at least.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Like, a lot of this story has examined the different ways goblin culture can be shaped. Like, we've heard about some of the violent ones, but we've seen like Liberty be a goblin princess but still be kind. And like, you're right. Like, seeing the market in action is really reinforcing this idea that goblins aren't just like shitty; they just keep growing up in shitty environments. And Toadswallow putting together a nicer one is just going to be good for everyone.
Mm, yeah, yeah, 100%.
I think like another thing here is we get like a thing where Verona looks at like all the other people who are at this market opening.
Mm,
And I specifically want to call out the grey sheep that Verona notes. So the
mm,
grey sheep are like innocents who have started spending decent amounts of time in the Undercity. And Verona notes that they're physically changing a bit like how we've heard the family man and the foreman and the bit of street witch are like they're getting these physical transformations as the Undercity grows. And so apparently that's happening much more easily to the grey sheep, and that seems like a fascinating detail that Verona shows interest in, but like skips over. Like that feels like it's got to be significant about something or something, right? Like
mm. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Hard to
like
say.
especially like I'm obviously still pushing this theory that Liz is specifically shaping the Undercity or something, or trying to get something specific out of it. And so just the idea that like this influence that's been seen on the leaders of the Undercity would happen more to those who are kind of sitting closer to the middle and have a foot in both sides. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Mm.
This just feels like one of those details where I was like, once we get this conversation with Liz and I find out what's going on with the Undercity, it's going to be like, oh, this is important that the grey sheep are apparently so much more open to this malleability.
Yeah, I don't know what it could mean though. Yeah, we'll see Liz in a bit. We can ask her then.
Yeah. Also, I love that the grey sheep who are listed are like the butcher, the bookstore owner, and the video rental guy. Like it's all such benign retail jobs, which like of course those are the people who fucking slip out of society, I guess. Like in a small town, like I've definitely there's a few shops in this town that I'm moving out of right now that yeah, like a bookstore, and you walk past it and there's only ever one person in there, and
Mm,
it like it's just sad that these are the people who are the grey sheep. But hey, maybe the Undercity's working out for them.
mm. Yeah, yeah. Why not? It's fine if that's where they find happiness. Go with God.
Yeah, as Zachary points out, like those are like butcher, bookstore owner, and video store person. Those are all those are all businesses that are kind of
Mm.
going by the
Failing
wayside at the moment.
businesses. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is butcher a butcher's? You know, a butcher's
Uh,
go on their way out.
I mean, with lab grown meat, I think they will be in 10 years, maybe. But
Mm,
definitely here. I mean, the ones in my town, like many other businesses, have been getting like undercut by the big players like Woolies and
mm.
Coles.
That tracks.
But yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Um, okay. So next up, Nicolette and Liberty arrive, and they both reveal the chaos of this market in their own ways. But then we get into business, which is fun. Um, God, it's so nice seeing Nicolette again. I love Nicolette. She's so wonderful.
I love the delivery of like when she arrives and all the goblins just go like ape shit and boo her, and I was kind of like, what? Why do the goblins hate her so much? And why have the Kenneteers like specifically gotten this car to drive up so Nicolette can come out and just get shut on by goblins? Like what's her? And
Hmm.
then like Liberty comes out the other side, and all the goblins go straight. I'm like, oh, okay, that's like it's just such a like great chaotic goblin energy to the delivery of this moment that Nicolette comes out and you're left wondering why the fuck she's being assaulted. And then it all comes together as Liberty steps out.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
I know I'm jumping ahead, but I love next chapter when Sheridan describes Liberty and Nicolette as some crazy rock star and her bodyguard.
Yeah, it's such a perfect descriptor. Um, I love the wand. So they tell Nicolette to fight back against the goblins, and she pulls out this wand that destroys everything that you love. It's just like so hardcore. I love it. It's such a perfect. Nicolette is so fucking. She's like quick as a whip. This one because she pulls out the perfect tool to shut down a goblin. Because not only is it destroy everything you love, it's you have to kiss it if you want to keep it, or
Yeah.
apologize if you want to survive. And it's so fucking perfect to humiliate this goblin in a way that gives the other goblins pause. God, she's so
Yeah.
fucking good.
Oh, I mean, I've headcanoned that she kind of gets to choose with that spell, like how
Mm.
exactly the curse can get lifted. And she chose kissing because she knew it would be humiliating to the goblin.
Yeah, kissing and
Um,
apologizing.
I actually wondered, like, do we know for sure that the wand isn't her implement?
um, I don't know the answer to that question,
Because
so
just the idea
definitely
that
no.
Nicolette's picked up a wand implement is just hilarious to me.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I guess we don't. I don't feel like we have enough info to know the answer to that.
Oh, the stick breaks. Okay, I forgot that. Never mind. Definitely not an.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's
Well,
an implement that you snap it and then it recovers.
mm,
It gets better.
yeah, maybe. Um, anyway, so yeah, we get the interaction between Nicolette and the BSW, which starts a little bumpy, but they obviously kind of build a mutual respect pretty quickly.
Yeah, and the Bitter Street Witch is very much playing the role. Do you remember, like, and this is a big callback back to like Arc 2 when we first met Alexander, and the Kenneteers defined themselves by like opposing him and being like against the rules, and like they
Mm,
went into the wild practitioner side of themselves.
mm, mm,
And that's like what the Bitter Street Witch is doing to Nicolette here in a very fun way. Like Nicolette sort of is like, "Oh, excuse me, I have to go get something." She's like, "I don't want excuses." And just like
mm.
you can just see Nicolette like is a bit taken aback by it at first, but is clearly actually extremely into it because she always enjoyed it when the Kenneteers did this to Alexander.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that I think is really interesting about the BSW and Nicolette combo is I think Nicolette's biggest problem is she's just a little bit too close to the establishment, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's things like she's worked with Musser, and she has a reason for it that makes sense and it's a fair justification. But if she was a little bit more outside of the establishment, that kind of thing wouldn't happen, right? And so, the, I do love the fact that I think BSW will be a perfect apprentice for Nicolette because BSW is so outside the establishment and so like raw that it will hopefully help Nicolette's more judicial crusader vibes come out rather than her
Mm.
surface level nice traditional practitioner energy that she kind of has sometimes.
Yeah, because she's always had the ability to be in both worlds. Like I think that's
Yes,
been like
yes,
Nicolette was born into that chaos, wild, rude thing, and grew into the Bellinger Circle. And it's kind of like pick a side sort of stuff, and pairing her with people like the Bitter Street, which helps push her in the right direction. I think.
yeah, yeah. Um, so then we get into Liberty and Toady, who have a fun reunion. It's nice, it's heartwarming, but also it's got some issues.
Yeah, it kind of has to get cut off because, yeah, I mean, Toadswallow. This has been like a thing since I think we found out Toadswallow knew Liberty in America in like Arc 7 or whatever.
Mm,
Um, which was like we'd always Toadswallow's always like, oh, they're great, and then just like doesn't ever like say anything more about them. Whereas they clearly fucking defined their lives by the stuff he taught them. Um, and so he's always come off as a bit, I guess, just like I don't even know the word I want. Just like he didn't care as much as he probably should. And Liberty
mm,
sort of finally gets to say this to him here, where she's like, "You abandoned us. You got us to love you, and then you abandoned us, and that's a way meaner prank to pull than like a fire ant douche or brain damage."
mm.
Um, and like, yeah, I love sort of seeing like Toadswallow sort of continues to not actually say anything to Liberty, but you really start to see here it's because he knows Anthem is a piece of shit and he doesn't have the heart to tell Liberty in America,
Yep.
basically. Like the reason he doesn't talk to them about why he had to leave is because it was because of Anthem and he doesn't want to break their hearts. And it's weirdly heartwarming while also probably just not the right call. Like, tell him, dude.
Yeah, it's yeah. Yeah. It's rough. Toadie's such a sweetheart. Like he knows Liberty sees her dad as, perfect and it's just rough. And given the fact that next chapter touches on this as well, I feel like this is going to come to a head pretty soon.
Oh yeah. Anthem's about to come and be a player, and Liberty's going to get caught up in it. It's going to be messy.
Yes, it's going to be quite messy. Hopefully, Toadie joins the Anthem's a piece of shit train, and that helps convince Liberty to join the Kenneteers against her dad, which is worrying, especially since we haven't seen America in a while. So who knows where America would side?
Yeah,
Trouble,
yeah.
trouble.
America's interesting because we haven't seen America since she tried to like kill Avery in the fairy markets, right?
No, she's been off doing her own thing.
Yeah, like Liberty's talked about her, but it's always been very like generic.
Mm,
I think like the other thing that really jumped out to me though, in this whole thing with Toadstool and Liberty, like is again just how good Wildbow is at helping reinforce to us like how this stuff connects to our protagonists, and like how everything is included in this story to discuss the major themes and topics he's talking about in this story. So like
mm,
when Liberty accuses Toadswallow of abandoning her and like how that's cruel, we get a moment where Verona looks over at Lucy, who's dropped her eyes to the ground, because nothing says, well, yeah, it's Lucy. It's abandoned father figures are her forte. Um, and then like right after this, as Verona pieces together that Liberty still thinks her father isn't a cunt,
mm.
she connects it to like her own dad. And I just love how like Walbo sort of gets two for one out of connecting this, what in any other story could just be like a side plot of Liberty and her dad, but like it's very
Mm,
deliberately integrated into both Lucy and Verona's journeys a little bit.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's really thematically connected, huh?
Yeah.
It's good shit.
Um,
Shall we
but
talk about some of
yes,
these items for sale?
yeah. So Toady actually launches the market, and
God, it's so good.
I love the first thing. So I think the first thing he does is he does like his three big like livestock trades, I guess. Uh, and one of them is like a big sewer rat slash ugly dog. And I don't know about you, I was just picturing those big sewer pig things from Dark Souls.
Mm,
You know the ones I'm talking about?
I think so. The rat things.
Yeah, but they look like pigs. I know everyone keeps saying that they're technically rats, but in the game they look like pigs. But they're giant rats that live in the sewers.
Uh, cool. All right.
I
Yeah.
just remember I remember those super vividly because I think like half of my first 10 deaths were to this one rat.
Mm.
It kept poisoning me, and there's no. I don't want to talk about that stupid game. Um,
Anyway, there's a lot of fun items in here. Yeah, lot of cool shit.
yeah, I love how Ram Jam is so distractible that Toadswallow has to keep like pressuring him into actually staying on topic about what his items do. Like he keeps saying, "Oh, this knife is great. You can stab people with it." And it's like, yeah, but what is its magical application?
Mm. Yeah. I love Taddy's items, which Toadswallow has to kind of justify by saying, "Oh, these ones are great. You can kind of stick them on other items as like a little bit of a boost because they're all so minor, but they are all very delightful."
Taddy's items are fun because they're just so unapologetically shit.
Mm.
Um, like she has something that tells you what's in people's pockets, except sometimes it's wrong. And then there's another one which is a ketchup packet, but it's filled with blood, which is just the most homemade market bullshit ever.
Yeah,
And then I
it's
also
good
love how
shit.
she's just so into her own items that she wants to go through the entire list, and Toad has to keep cutting her off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean
Ah.
the whole market has this really fun vibe of it like I guess the fairy markets reminded me of like and this is probably like a very oceanic experience, by going to like Southeast Asian markets like in Thailand,
Mm,
and just this like sense that there was a system there and everything made sense. I just didn't really understand it, and it felt
mm,
chaotic
mm,
um, to me. But I knew that it wasn't actually sort of that chaotic. It was just operating on a different level to me. And this feels the same, but also discernibly different in that this one is just kind of openly a chaotic mess.
mm. Yeah. Um, but that's the charm of it, right? And obviously,
Yeah,
it's the first market, and I'm sure once it gets to the point where we can have some more permanent stalls, it will stabilize a little bit. But it's just so delightful. Like the chaos of it, the goblinness of it is just so fun.
yeah. Well, and I think like one of the things that stands out to me, comparing it to the fairy markets, is everything in the fairy market was like the downsides were kind of hidden, whereas because this is a goblin market, they wear them on their sleeves.
Mm,
Like, the fairy market would never openly say, this tells you what's in their pockets, except sometimes it's wrong. They'd just be like, it can tell you what's in someone's pockets or something.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's cool shit. There's definitely situations where it could all be useful.
Yeah, so yeah, but you're right. I can't wait to see it as it keeps growing and as this market becomes a thing. I can't wait to see how it continues to like compare and contrast with the fairy markets.
Mm,
Like, if Toadstool is still kind of pushing his "we are the eighth fairy court" sort of shtick, how is that going to kind of
mm,
add up once it becomes more mature? I can't wait to see.
mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, we haven't seen the winter market, right? I wonder what that's like. Maybe Guillermo can take us one
Yeah,
time.
I wonder. I wonder. It feels like it would be rough, like however it works. It feels like it would be the things that are sold there would be very
Oh yeah,
dangerous.
oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think Clawford calls out who was maybe my favorite, which is the arm with a bladed kind of joint, which is
I
fucking
just love
delightful.
I love the story of like somebody lost their arm and it went on a journey in the ruins and in the Warrens and found itself. And it's
Yeah.
like, wait, but it's an
Fucking
arm. What does that
hilarious.
mean? What are you talking about?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's good shit. So yeah, the market is going well. Nicolette comes in to give a warning to the team, which is that it's time. It's time for the chat with Liz.
Oh, fucking finally. I've been saying they need to do this since 14.2 or something. Um, yeah, I'm. We're about to sort of move into the next phase of the story, and we'll touch on that in a bit, I guess. But I'm just so excited because we also get the reveal here that Charles will be there too. So like, this chat with Charles and Liz is both overdue and also just like something that I don't think we're ready for.
Mm, yeah, I don't know what it's going to be, right? Like, Liz really has been hanging like a specter over the past few arcs, and
Yeah.
we don't even know what impact she has over the Undercity or Kennet or
Hmm.
anything. Like what she's up to, what her goals are, what she cares about. Like,
Oh yeah, like I feel like we've been wildly speculating
yeah.
what
So
that
it's
could be,
time to
but
find out.
yeah, yeah, exactly. We could finally just talk to her and yeah, get the info.
Yeah. But not next chapter.
Yeah. So just before we go on, I just want to say like I really love like 16.1 really establishes what this arc is setting out to do. I think which was arcs 14 and 15 were very much like the crisis management and like oh fuck, where do we go from here after arc 13's loss arcs.
Mm,
And then Verona a number of times in 16.1 is very like deliberately thinking, okay, we can start to grow again and we can start to build.
mm,
And 16.2 I think backs this up enough where it's like 14 and 15 were this new phase in the story after the Carmine thing, and now this is like the next chapter in part 2. This is okay, we've managed to find our feet again after the loss, and now
mm,
arc 16 is the first of our arcs. It's like, okay, how do we build from here? Like, now we're in the position to start growing again. How do we do that? And
mm.
that's so cool. I can't wait to see where that goes,
Yeah, definitely.
especially in an arc called Left in the Dust, which implies not everyone's going to make it.
Yeah, I mean, we got the family man as the first person who. Sorry, not the family man. The foreman as the first person who might be left in the dust. But
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
yeah, fingers crossed. We will see. So yeah, rather than getting to have that combo with Liz, we cruelly are sent to Thunder Bay instead, where Avery is, checking her Tinder and seeing what good matches she would have. No, yeah, the horror of realizing what this chapter is at the start is terrifying. And then, of
It's
course,
such a
Wildbow fakes us out. It's just so cruel.
it's such a jarring opening to this
Yeah,
chapter
I
as
know,
well.
right?
Because you sort of end 16.1 and you're like, oh, okay, I hope we're getting the Liz chat. And then you see it's an Avery chapter instead, and you're like, oh, okay, that's fine. We'll do some Avery stuff.
Mm,
And then it just starts talking about like 15-year-old dudes dating profiles. And I was like, what the fuck is what are we doing here?
yep. It's wild. But yeah, it's a fun chapter.
Yeah, I something I want to bring up though from this section. So yeah, Avery's Facebook stalking. This I keep wanting to call him the judge, but that's a loaded term in this
Mm,
story. So I guess I'll stick with this justice of the peace title.
mm,
But something that came up in 15.z and comes up again in this section is like this psychic link Avery and Snowdrop have.
mm,
And I just wanted to call it out as like such a fun idea because the way Wildbow's constructed it is they don't just give each other like exactly the words or the phrases or even like necessarily imagery. It's like these vague feelings and ideas, and like Avery still has to interpret it to sort of understand what Snowdrop is sending her. And I just think that that's such a fun and like cool idea that these two can communicate really well, but there's also the room for it to just be a little bit unclear when he needs it to be.
yeah, there to be a bit of vagueness when it's
Yeah.
when it can be used is definitely cool.
Also, just nice for Snowdrop to be able to send somebody communication that doesn't get inverted.
Yeah, I mean it's not 100% understandable sometimes, but at least it's better than what Snowdrop
Yeah.
normally is. Is like
And I think Avery says there's one point where Snowdrop like concentrates to make the image she's sending Avery clearer. So there
mm,
is also this element of like they can get more
mm,
or less vague, like they can get sort of more discerning, but
but it
it
takes
costs
effort.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, such a like just a great mechanic. Like Walbo's so good at coming up with these things that leave him a lot of wriggle room when he's going to use it later.
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
Um, But yeah, I guess to touch on this justice of the peace that Avery is sort of going through his socials, something she kind of calls out is how he's just like openly taking and sharing photos with like people like Musser and Florin, and she almost calls it out as like brazen. She's sort of like, oh, how can this be a conspiracy to take over if they're just like blatantly posting it, like photos of them all together? And I was like, Avery, isn't that like exactly the point? Like it doesn't matter. Like nobody's in a position to do anything. No, wait, well, wait, yeah, I don't know. Like it just hasn't mattered to them in the past. Like this is the shit they can get away with. like,
Mm,
um, especially like the justice of the peace is acting as this kind of innocent slash aware buffer, karma wise, and it's just like just it doesn't matter that they're posting about it because what does that mean to anyone who could act against them?
mm, yeah, it's. I guess it's a marker of how little respect practitioners have for others, in the sense that they're not hiding. Like, they're so confident that this like online world is just so foreign to others that they really don't give a shit about it. And
Yeah, you're
I
right.
mean,
Like
it's
we've seen
hubris.
this with Thunder Bay a lot, right? Like she
Yeah,
doesn't
she doesn't get
understand
it.
some of these things. Yeah.
Yeah, so the practitioners can get complacent about it. So Avery can exploit that.
I mean, yeah, fingers crossed. Yeah, she can just dob them in. But again, it's something we'll talk about it more when Anthem's whole thing comes up. But it's continuing to reinforce, I think, this justice of the peace, like how much we're now dealing with guys who are integrating or using the power of innocence to get around the limitations practitioners are supposed to have. Like
Mm,
we talked about this a lot in Arc 14, but we spent the first 13 arcs dealing pretty exclusively with the magical world, and now we're very much dealing with people who are manipulating the world of the innocent to help themselves. And this judge guy is such a prominent example of how they're doing stuff like that.
mm, yeah, yeah, definitely. It's good. They're widening the world a bit. Um, Anywho, so yeah, Avery finds a wonderful new type of other, a homunculi, and they are disgusting.
Ruben, you did. I specifically wrote his name down so you could
Yes,
introduce him by
Duke
his God
Carl
given title.
Spadberg the Wretched. Yeah.
Yeah, A Watts in the chat. I mean, I love this little dump of homunculi lore. Like, it's just so fun. I love that the practitioners trick animals into growing these things for them to save the effort.
Yeah, it's wild. Very fun world building. It's the casual horror of this is so delightful. Like, they don't have any limbs. It's just like really off-putting, casually horrifying, which is classic practitioner.
Yeah, it's such a great little idea, and I love like conceptually how they disturb augury just by being shitty and in the way all the time.
Mm,
Like, it's just everything comes back to them because they're these odd looking little potatoes.
yeah, weird little things.
Also, Avery notes that this thing starts spying on her later, and she thinks, "Hey, what? You too?" Which I think is an "et tu, Brute" joke. I love it.
Yeah. So yeah, Avery begins working on a connection tracking setup, and the tearaway kid comes in to report that Thomas has tightened security, but there's still some valuable info coming in. This connection tracker is such a fun, cool little powerful tool, like
Yeah,
in universe, and also just as like a cool storytelling info tool, because it does pay off in this chapter very coolly soon. Um, yeah, just like it's just such a cool, clever little thing. I love it.
I feel like we've said this before, but I'm gonna say it again anyway because I'm not 100%. I just love the concept of this because especially like Avery's doing private investigation work, and such a trope in like PI movies is to have that big corkboard with all the strings connecting
Yes.
people, and this is one of those that actually makes sense and is important and like magically powered. I just love that. Like
Yeah,
just
it's very cool.
like just having that fucking Charlie Day conspiracy
Yeah,
wall, but
yeah,
actually it's being powered by magic, so the connections are color coded to matter and everything. It's just so cool.
yeah. It's awesome. It's such a cool image. It just is wonderful.
And the Tearaway Kid continues to just be amazing. Like he's so unapologetically him. I love how he gets annoyed whenever she uses the concept of weekends and weekdays.
Yeah. Uh, Tearaway Kid is old school, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't know. He just seems super cool, and I love how he's very direct about like he doesn't give her any info until he gets an update on how he's going to get like the payment from her. And it sounds like Avery is planning on later this weekend, presumably talking to Jude about finding this guy's girlfriend. Like I just can't wait to see where this keeps going because the Tearaway Kid is just so fun as a personality.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. The Tearaway Kid. I mean, all of the Lost that Avery has recruited are just so
True,
fucking fun. I want them all to
true.
stick around forever.
Well, from memory, this guy's girl was like part of a giant like whale with cloud wings or something. I keep thinking of the Sandbird from Mario Sunshine, but I don't think it's that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Tearaway Kid dressed up as this giant angel to try and woo her, right? So obviously
Yeah.
she's uh, I don't know, like divine in some way.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, so one of the details we sort of get from here is Anthem. I mean, we don't know it's him quite yet, but we later find out it's Anthem. Is like bringing weapons into the city for a fight, presumably against like the Lord of Thunder Bay. And what's really interesting though is that apparently this Justice of the Peace guy is actually quite like important and critical to this plan working. Like they're investing a lot in him.
Well, is it that he's critical, or is it just that he's like the vibe I got is they might need him for some reason, but they're just investing so many resources because they're really just diving very deeply into this plan. Like, I don't know whether
I
yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I thought the Tearaway Kid had one line where he specifically said they're putting so much into this guy, he must be important. But maybe I'm misremembering exactly how that
No,
line went.
that is in there, but I don't know. Like to me, the vibe that I get is the wits are so they're going
All in.
so hard on this. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That they're spending so much money to the judge who might not even be relevant. You know, like they're just going that fucking hard.
It reminds me of what we used to talk about when they were going up against Maristica, where it's not that they have the one plan, it's that they've also got these 10 ways to pick themselves up if things go wrong. And like this is Musser making sure all of those are gonna work out. Like or not Musser, but the wits or whatever. Like, even if something goes wrong, they've got this guy in their pocket to make it go away. And he's probably not the only fallback.
Mm, yeah, I think so. Um, so yeah, Avery heads to check in with the Lord of Thunder Bay and give her the news that both Thomas and the Legendres are working with Musser. Florin is probably involved. Thea is pissed off and ditching.
Yeah, and I mean, good riddance on Thea being kicked out by them. It's sort of yeah, whatever. But like, I fucking love that Florin is still somehow just like Avery. He's the only one Avery hasn't been able to tie directly to this. Like,
Mm,
I continue to enjoy just how sneaky this fucker is. And I feel like the last update we got from Florin was that Avery thought he was putting together his own scheme to coup against her. So, like, is Tomas and the Legendaries fight his coup, or
mm,
is Musser planning one and Florin has kept his distance like he said he would, and Florin's going to upend their coup with his coup? Like,
yeah, yeah. Who knows? It's going to be messy, whatever it is, and you really get the sense that the Thunder Bay is not equipped for it.
yeah.
Yeah, especially without Gilkey around, who is her, translator, I guess.
Yeah, I really got the vibe from 15.z that Gilkey was doing a lot of the holding this town together
Yep,
stuff, and
yep.
he's moved on now
He's
to
gone
better things.
seemingly. But yeah, so I hope we get more Thea as well. Thea seems to be leaving the plot at this point, but God, she was so fun. And as a foil for Verona's desperation to escape the real world, she was very thematically relevant. So I just love that.
Yeah, like we put that to great use when they were breaking out of her vault.
Yes, but I want more.
Yeah,
I want more Thea magic worlds.
I mean, I guess this is the thing, right? Is like Thea's been left as a great Chekhov's gun for Wildbow now because he
Mm,
could not use her. Like this she could just fall out of the story if necessary, but Also, like Verona did steal her battery, and so now at any point, some character could figure that out and tell her, or she could figure it out for herself, and then she could explosively come back in at the worst possible moment to fuck Verona's day up. Um, so yeah, it could go either way, and again, just another example of great writing. Wildbow's left himself. Like we could get angry Thea, or maybe we won't. We'll see.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Um,
Oh, sorry. So something else I wanted to talk about. Uh, We learn that what Anthem is like smuggling in for these guys is just like guns. Like, I guess when they were talking about weapons at the start of this chapter and like, oh, they're trafficking weapons. It was a bunch of practitioners. My first thought was, oh, so what? Like, all these magical clems type items that do crazy shit. But it's not. It's not magic items. It's not magic potions or anything. It's just Anthem is giving them presumably like automatic rifles and shit. Um, it's just such a vastly different tone to again the first 13 arcs of this story were the magical side of the practice, whereas these guys who have one foot in the innocent world are also just gonna smuggle a bunch of machine guns to the witch hunters and stuff.
yeah. The fact that they're buying guns and not like, I don't know, wands or whatever
Yeah,
is interesting, because I wonder if there's just this aspect of like they want to just destabilize things, right? Like they want to just fuck shit up and destabilize things. They might not even use the guns themselves. They might just be using them to give them to other people or whatever, like the witch hunters, but also like any other groups, just like innocent groups. Although I have to say, the more violence they cause, maybe this will be helpful to Charles in some way as like a power boost because things are getting more
yeah,
violent. I don't know. Or like guns are again, relatively well, not especially, but somewhat modern, right, of a technology.
yeah.
So maybe it's an aspect of a weapon that Thunder Bay just wouldn't normally be able to kind of catch, or wouldn't normally care enough to catch.
Yeah, I think
Which
I think that was mentioned a little bit in when Raph invaded
mm,
Kennet. There were some others who guns are just really effective against because it's like defenses against them aren't really something they're equipped with.
yeah. So yeah, maybe that's the reason. Maybe it's you know, keeping it under Thunder Bay's nose.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just like again, it's just such a in previous arcs we had like Bristow bringing Aware who had magic powers. We had Alexander smuggling Aware as well, but he had like apprentices. Like these guys are just bringing guns, and they're giving most, if not all of them, to the witch hunters who will presumably work with them. Um, so it's just like it sets this very different. Like this isn't a conflict that's just going to affect the magical world. Like the Bristow Alexander fight or even the Carmine thing. This is very much one that's like I don't feel like they'd be bringing guns to only use them against the others. Like this is going to spiral a bit beyond that, I imagine.
Mm,
Like if you're choosing guns, I feel like you're setting up this is violence that you are okay with innocents witnessing.
mm, yeah, yeah. Interesting.
I'm also keen to hear from the witch hunters. Like it's very much an escalation on their end to just be like weapons dealing with practitioners. I guess we heard that they were, people dealing with Bristow, so maybe maybe not so much, but it almost seems like the witch hunters are potentially working more with Musser than they were working with practitioners before Arc 13, and I'm very interested to hear their understanding about like what that like are they just anti Charles? Do they blame Charles for all the witch hunters who died in Arc 13, and they're working with
Yeah.
Musser to dethrone Charles specifically, or like are the witch hunters going to be involved in Thunder Bay? Did he just tell them an other is in charge of Thunder Bay and he's going to unleash witch hunters on them? Like,
But
yeah,
the
I don't
interesting
know.
thing is, and the kind of the smoking gun in my mind is Musser helped Charles get where he is. Like, for fuck's sake, how can
Yeah,
you think Charles is bad and not think Musser is bad? Like, they're two sides of the same fucking coin.
yeah, but they won't know that. Like,
Yeah, until the Kennetiers tell them for sure.
yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, the witch hunters have been specifically listed as like when we talk about how Avery is trying to make sure that there's not 100 sides to the final conflict this time. Every time that somebody thinks that, they list the witch hunters as somebody who really interfered with what they could do in Arc 13. So it feels like something we'll have to deal with eventually, like especially if Musser is buying the witch hunters. And they're going to be a tool in his pocket. It feels like the Kennedys are going to have to try and talk to them again.
Mm, yeah. No, I think
Fun thing
so.
about witch hunters too, they're not awoken, so they can lie. Like I'd love this moment where Musser's invested a bunch in giving them weapons because of a deal that they can just break.
Yeah, shit. That would be pretty good. I would love to see it. So yeah, Avery heads home from chatting to Thunder Bay and gets in a bit of quick reading on some of these books that she has got from the Garricks.
Yes, and here she's really demonstrating what I would say is the most powerful magic Avery's ever performed, which is she needed time later in the weekend, so she just did all of the work she needed to do early, so that by midday on Saturday she's just done all her work. Like she did all her
Mm,
homework on Friday night, so she'd have the weekend free.
yeah,
That's
which
proper fucking witchcraft.
it's interesting. I think Avery. I wouldn't have expected her to dabble in chronomancy, but
Yeah.
seems that she has, which is fine. You know, it's a cool type of power. Um,
Yeah, she must have done some magic. That's not something real people can do.
yeah, I'm kind of. I guess I should say I'm worried that we're not going to see Gilkey again ever. Is that going to be the case? I miss him.
Yeah, I feel like I spent 2 arcs being like, "Gilkey seems great. When are we getting more Gilkey?" And then we finally got the interlude, and I was like, "That's not enough Gilkey."
Yeah, that can't just be the end of Gilkey, surely.
We finally got our taste of Gilkey, and then it seems like at the end of it, he made that deal with Marisica, and I don't know. I feel like we might see Gilkey again, but it's not going to be the Gilkey we last saw.
Yeah, it's going to be different for sure.
But yeah, to touch on these books that Avery reads, and obviously we'll get to Hazel in a second. We're obviously going to talk about Hazel. But the first book that Avery pulls also has some stuff I wanted to mention. Because it's basically this book that's a bunch of like outdated theories on how the paths work. Um, and I guess I love that this is a world that's so deep that we can get a book that's just kind of about shit that's wrong, but people used to think like all this idea that they reckon that there maybe were architects that put the paths together, but that didn't really make sense. And it's kind of
Mm,
like because it's just these practitioners going to the early dreams, so just looking at this place and it's like there has to be a reason
we
for this.
don't
Somebody must
understand
have
it.
made this.
Yeah,
Yeah, like,
they're
it,
hopeless.
it's so real. Like there are so many real life theories like that where like people attributed things to conspiracy theories or aliens or whatnot because it's like that makes more sense than just it's fucking chaos.
Mm.
I also particularly like the idea that that book suggests, and I'm kind of headcanoning it as true, that the reason that paths are kind of so whimsical is because as the like outer part of the collective consciousness that is the pactverse cosmos, like the paths are just a bit childlike.
Mm,
Because I especially just love that idea that if the paths are the sort of outer edges of this like thought cosmos, the idea that the whimsical parts are like on the outside because that's what we're meant to drop, and as you get closer to earth it gets more like serious and shit, like the ruins that are all gloomy and shit, like that's adulthood, that's the mature stuff, that's what's more important and bigger and closer to reality.
mm, yeah.
Like that just makes a lot of sense to me.
The far out reaches of the paths is so interesting. Um, so like the sheer level of power that exists out if you go out far enough. Like the idea of a true wish, like you're so
Yeah.
plugged into the base reality that you can kind of rewrite the world to do whatever you want, like make Pokemon real, which is what I would have wished about when I was a child. Um, but like you could do all kinds of wild shit. And yeah, man, it just be
Ruben, you wouldn't need to wish for Pokemon to be real if you lived in the other verse. It already is.
yeah, you're right. It kind of already is, isn't it?
um, I guess like just the idea that the paths are a kind of well, like this book suggests that the paths could be viewed as almost one realm that has a bit of a personality in and of itself, and that personality likes setting up these little challenges for people to complete. Was a bit like it finally kind of made sense to me why so many paths do fit these kind, like there are a sort of loose set of rules for paths, like they need to
Mm,
be linear, they need to give you boons, like
mm,
blah blah blah. And some of them might break that a little bit, but that was like something that had always kind of confused me with my own understanding of how the paths and like the general cosmos of the other verse worked. Was I was always a bit like, are so many of the
Yeah.
paths consistently this one template.
Yeah.
And this was like a bit of a like, oh, like I hadn't thought about considering it as an entity that was almost trying to help set up those random pieces to be challenges to encourage you to come and play games with it.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's a fun kind of vibe, I suppose. Um,
Yeah. But should we talk about fucking Hazel, the MVP of just the world?
yeah.
Um, I mean, my favorite part of this massive dump we get on why Hazel is a fucking boss would have to be the part where she went so deep into the paths that she went beyond the paths, and this is where we get to the stuff you mentioned about like getting true wishes.
Yeah.
But it also says she described that she got into some places that were like the levers and cogs of reality.
Yeah. What the fuck does that mean? That's
Fucking
awesome.
this is just like Walpo's so good at just dropping little side stories in here that's just like you read this and you're like, I want to read that book. Like, you know, next serial is just Hazel's adventures through the levers and cogs of reality.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very cool.
Like I remember in one of the I think it was like the familiar book or the domain book, maybe. Um, like back in Arc 6, we heard from like somebody who was a patron of an alternative to time. Like
Mm.
time had won the battle for being time, I guess. And
Mm.
this was like a different thing that wasn't time, but was an like an alternative. And just like this sounds like the sort of stuff Hazel's getting into, like just this fundamental reality changing stuff. And I'm like, how do you get there? Like that's so crazy.
Yeah. It's
Just
very wild. How does that
um
even? Yeah. Yeah. God. Just it's so grand conceptually that it's hard to even feel like I'm keeping it in my mind. You know.
Yeah, and Wobbo really ticks all those boxes of like how to set up the history of world building by not giving us like a concrete explanation or even ending to her legend. Like it sounds like she got out of the paths and then just disappeared one day, and everyone who had anything to do with her got like excommunicated and mostly killed. And so then you just then you're like, so wait, what the fuck is extra secret? Didn't they want getting out? Like somebody like, yeah, it's such an
Mm.
enticing backstory legend. Like, there's some story here, and I don't think we'll ever get it. And I'm just mad about that.
Mm. Yeah. 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 We're never gonna get. It's so sad. I want more. But unfortunately, well, but can't give us any more because we've got to get back to the actual plot. Ugh. Which is Liberty showing
Gross.
up with Nicolette to hang out with Avery and hang out with the fam, which is wonderful.
Yeah, and I mean, like obviously, yeah, Liberty and Nicolette arriving, and like Sheridan pouring water on Liberty. Like it's just again, it's another moment of two separate groups of characters colliding and just having fantastic interactions with each other.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
just the Liberty and Sheridan
Yeah.
banter. I'm so here for.
The share. Yeah. God. The the fact that I mean, thinking back to when Lucy met Sheridan and Lucy just wouldn't accept Sheridan's bullshit, and it led to this fun dynamic. Liberty is like a level higher where Liberty doesn't just not take shit from Sheridan, but actively escalates Sheridan to a level where even I think Sheridan becomes uncomfortable with it. Like Sheridan's like, I don't want to go this far. Excuse me. Like
Yeah,
it's
it
just
was
so
almost
fucking good.
it's almost the opposite. Like Lucy didn't put up with Sheridan's bullshit. Liberty's like escalating. Yeah, like Liberty's encouraging it. Like, yeah, Sheridan's like, I'm gonna pour water on you if you hug me, and Liberty's like, do it, you fucking coward.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
like genuinely, I could see this being a thing where like Liberty stays over. And Sheridan and Avery end up taking the curtain down in the middle of the room because the three of them want to hang out, which I just would never have expected to be a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. God, Liberty. So wonderful.
Like, yeah, I genuinely think Sheridan and Liberty got on like wildfire in a way that could be actually good for Sheridan.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I agree.
I also love how one of the things Nicolette does as she's talking to Avery is she gives like it's like the sort of thing that parents give to a babysitter of like a 2-year old, where it's like here's the number to call if there's an emergency, and like just Anthem's obviously like a massive piece of shit, but it was one of those moments where I was like, God, it would really suck to have Liberty in America as your daughters from a parenting perspective, because like she has driver's insurance and shit, even though she can't legally drive. It's
Mm,
so fun.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, good stuff. God, I love getting Anthem's details. So good. I just,
Yeah.
I know Avery's going to prank call that number. Like, because I can see the fact that Avery has Anthem's number is going to become important when we get to the Anthem showdown, right? Um,
Yeah, I mean, they've got a potential hostage right here, you know?
well, yeah, I suppose. Yeah, but just some good stuff. Some good stuff.
Um, also, like, I guess the last thing I want to talk about here. So one of the things that comes up is like Kelsey talks about the sleeping arrangements here. And there were some pretty extensive talks about this on our Discord. So I don't really want to talk about it too much on the podcast because you can just read it on the Discord. But
Mm,
yeah, it's interesting. I'm unsure whether I agree or disagree with Kelsey now about whether this is fair to insist on having the door open like this. I feel like people have made really good arguments both for and against it, and now I don't know.
mm, mm. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's fine. It's like Kelsey treating Avery equitably, despite the fact that it is more of an objective nuisance to Avery than it would be to her siblings. I think is a marker of like I think is necessary. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I just part of me thinks the whole thing feels moot to me because, like, I know there's a curtain dividing Sheridan and Avery's
Yeah,
sides of the room,
true.
but like
It's
Ruben,
not much.
you lived in that place in California with me. I think we can both attest to the fact that that means fuck all.
Yeah.
Um, so I like part of it just feels like a redundant argument to me because I'm like, there's already no privacy for real in that room.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You're right. It's probably unnecessary. Anyway, so yeah, Avery and Liberty have a fun hangout, and they're kind of talking about all these fun things that they're going to plan, like the path run. And they bump into Nora, who is very intimidated and possibly jealous of Liberty, and it's just so much fun because Nora, like, how can anyone not see Liberty and just be immediately like, "This is
Oh
wild"?
fuck.
And I love because Nora is somewhat like uh, slightly punk, and Liberty is just so hardcore punk. I can imagine Nora just being like, "Oh, of course Avery will love somebody who's way more hardcore punk than me." And I just think that's
Yeah.
so funny conceptually.
No, yeah, I agree. Like I could see Nora sort of putting down her dream style for herself and it looking very similar to a lot of what Liberty's whole deal is. And then just like to see that Avery's out of town friend is just like kind of who you're trying to be and who you wish you were confident enough to be, which is fucking wreck you.
Mm,
Um, I mean, well, yeah. So the really interesting part of this is Avery leaves the two of them alone for a second and takes a glance back and notes that Nora's gone from looking intimidated to looking just outright scared.
mm.
And I guess, the shipping wars have been active for a while now on Avery's side of things. And so I'm just worried that if Liberty is genuinely keen on Avery, like a lot of people think, um, has she maybe come at Nora in a pretty aggressive way? Because Nora,
Interesting. Interesting. I wonder if Liberty's gotten too wrapped up in the shipping wars herself.
yeah, exactly.
I love that thought.
Because that will be very interesting for Avery and Liberty's dynamic as we head into Anthem coming in as well. Like it's just that would be a disaster waiting to happen.
Mm, yeah. Yowza.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess that's really this chapter. Like, it was a fun chapter, short of showing off all these ways Avery's connecting with everyone.
Mm,
I can't wait to see more of Thunder Bay, but also I hope that before we do, we go back to find out about Liz, please.
mm, yeah. Good chapter. Good chapter. Good stuff. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the Anthem shit blowing up. I think that would be very
Yeah, I can't wait. And
fun.
wait, the really interesting thing with all this has been like, there's been so much talk about how Avery's kind of doing the best in Thunder Bay, but also something we do keep getting reminded of is that really, apart from Snowdrop, she's like quote unquote alone in Thunder Bay.
Mm,
And I think there hasn't really been active or open conflict in Thunder Bay, so it hasn't been a problem. Like I would worry for Avery if Thunder Bay becomes a war zone and it's just her and Snowdrop there. I think the fact that she's alone there would become important pretty quickly.
mm, yeah. Yeah. yeah, there's yeah, it's just all kinds of fun stuff going on. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
just reading chat who have left some very fun
Yeah.
shipping messages in the fucking live thread.
Yeah, there's
So
discussion
silly.
on whether Liberty actually was maybe threatening Nora, like I think, or like just the fact that Liberty said anything to Nora made her look scared, which is absolutely a possibility.
Not anything, but Liberty trying to play wing woman to
Yeah,
Avery would be even more horrifying potentially.
yeah, I could definitely see Nora looking terrified because Liberty was just upfront about being like, "Oh, so you're into Avery, right? She's into you."
Yeah.
Um, I guess we'll see. I mean, I hope you're all right, but just the way it was phrased right at the end of that
Mm,
chapter gave me the other vibe.
yeah, we will see. But before we wrap up, we've got some Pale predictions, Elliot. Predictions from the community left in our Pale Predictor form.
Yeah.
Do you want to pull out your prediction first?
Yeah, I won't read the whole thing because it's quite long, but this one comes to us from Tizarwat, who basically proposes this theory that the trio is about to become a bit lopsided, with Avery becoming a bit more powerful and like the more focal one. And I really like this because this is something that was brought up a lot right at the start of the story. Like we heard so much in arcs like 1 and 2 about how the three were like a plate and you couldn't tip too much on one end or the whole thing would like topple over. And then we haven't really heard about it for, I don't reckon we've talked about it for 6 or 7 arcs, right? Um,
Mm,
so I love this idea that Tasawat is suggesting that that concept will come back to bite us all in the ass because as Avery continues to be the happiest, most successful, most powerful one over in Thunder Bay, perhaps she will start to tip that plate and it'll have disastrous consequences for the other two, and she won't quite understand it until it's too late. Um, yeah, so I just love that idea.
mm, mm. Yeah, it's yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I wonder what the implications would be. Like, they seem to be becoming so quickly, so powerful, and so interesting. I wonder if
Yeah,
they're yeah, like how this will impact their ability to actually function. I suppose.
yeah, because the other side of it is, like presumably part of like say the plate starts to tip and things start going wrong, and Avery like finds out and notices or whatever. The way to correct that, presumably as well as trying to lift Lucy and Verona up, is to tip herself a bit down.
Mm,
And that's fascinating to me. The idea of like how can how can Avery make her life less good in order to help balance things with the others is such a terrible dilemma to get faced with.
mm, mm.
Like,
Yeah.
imagine if she has to break up with Nora because her being happy and in a relationship has pushed things too far.
Oh, that's horrible, but would be interesting. Um, I put out one that I don't even know if I would call a theory because I think it's just correct. And I'm very much on board with it from last week's chapters, which is from Fran saying the mouse in a trench coat is trying to be nice, just really bad at showing it and looks like a horrible creep, which I think is just true. And I wanted to pull this one out because I just want the mouse in a trench coat to have more opportunities to be the best character in this story. As I can see the potential there. I can see the potential for the mouse in the trench coat to be so spectacular. And I just want to see how far they can fly, you know?
Yeah. I don't know. I spend most of my day going out of my way to not have thoughts about the mouse in a trench coat. So
Nah, they're wonderful. They're so
haven't thought about
good.
this. I mean, yeah, they're so horrifying. And they were like, wasn't there that moment? And these were in the chapters you covered, so they're
Yes.
they're a bit looser in my head. But like Lucy told him to put his dick away, and he tried, but he just couldn't.
Yeah,
Was that a thing?
and like he was wearing more clothes now that time we saw
Yeah.
him, which seemed like an intentional reaction. And like Lucy was like, "Are you working for the family man?" And he shook his head, and he's like, "He's trying his little he's trying his little hardest. Lucy, be nice to him."
Yeah, poor fucker. If he is just actually a nice person who means well, that's like maybe the most pitiful character in this story, which is really saying something.
Mm, yeah, good stuff. Um, so yeah, I guess that's the end of the show.
Yes, we're still not running discussion questions because next week it'll just be me. But next year come back for discussion questions.
Yeah, good luck with the show, Elliot. Take good care of it.
I'll burn it to the ground.
to the ground. If you all want to leave us your thoughts on these chapters or on this episode, you can do so in the discussion threads, which still exist even though we haven't had discussion questions for a little while.
Yep. And if you want updates on the show, like when the episode's coming out, or just, sick memes, as we mentioned, that's our Twitter feed at Pale Reflectcast.
Yeah.
It's not all memes too, though. We did a shitty, like dad joke.
No, but
yesterday.
it's meme vibes, and it's wonderful.
True.
Definitely, you should check it out. It's good shit. Yeah, it's fun memes. I really like them, and Elliot and I, definitely pay attention to which memes get the most likes to determine which memes the community loves the most. So, if you like memes,
so
go
we can
and like
improve
them on
that craft.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so sad. The meme that I was the proudest of didn't get many likes, and it really makes me sad. Anyway,
I reckon the two that I've pushed out that have done the worst were the two that I was the
I
proudest
know.
of.
It's very clear that we just don't know what we're doing, but whatever. That's life.
Don't forget to check out doofmedia.com as well to find out about all the other shows on Doof.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Pale in Comparison has started back up after their hiatus, so go check it out. They're in Arc 5 of Pact, and well, it's a delightful time for us and for them, not so much for the characters, but yeah, go check it out.
Yeah. And if you want to support the shows on the Doof Media Network, you can head to patreon.com/doofmedia, where you can get access to all kinds of bonus shows, including a bonus show that we do called The High Ground, which we love, and it's very fun.
Yeah, we just released our episode a few days ago on our Christmas one on the Star Wars Holiday Special, because we're watching that every year for some reason. And don't forget to stop by Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/Wildbow. I mean, our schedule's gotten a bit whack because we're taking like Christmas breaks and stuff. Wildbow never stops publishing. So, if you're continuing to enjoy his content through the holidays, consider giving him a Christmas present.
Yeah, cool. And with that, the show is done.